Hi BookTube, I'm here today to do the Meowing About Books tag. The original was created by the BookTube goddess, and I'll link that video down below. So, let's talk about cats and books. First question, catnip, an addictive book or series that you devour in one sitting, and that's going to be the Dead Kid Detective Agency. My golly, that book series is just so readable. It's funny, it's educational, it's entertaining, it's got a great plot, it's got great characters. It's about a 13-year-old girl, so I guess middle-aged, early YA girl who accidentally summons the ghosts of a bunch of dead kids. And then they go about solving this kind of overarching story that's going on, but each individual book is also about solving how each of the kids died. So you get a lot of history, Canadian history in there, as well as, you know, just a really entertaining plot line, and, you know, the story of a young girl growing up in Sticksville, which is a term we use. I don't know if you use it in the States, but in Canada it just means like a town in the middle of nowhere, which is where I live. Yeah, I love those series so much, and I can just definitely read those all in one series, one sitting. That's what I meant. Litterbox, a book so stinky you want to bury it in the sand. And I think I'm gonna go with The Painted Bird by Jerzy Kosinski. It's basically torture porn, and it seemed like it was acceptable when I was first reading it until I looked further into this book, because it's kind of marketed as being autobiographical. So we have this story of this kid who may or may not be Jewish during World War II in Eastern Europe, kind of going from town to town, and, you know, getting tortured and bullied, and, you know, horrible things happen to him. And I'm reading it thinking, oh, this, you know, some of this stuff actually happened to Jerzy Kosinski. Turns out he was completely fine. You know, his family went off and they were rich enough to go and escape and live in a fancy house somewhere. So he was perfectly fine. None of this whatsoever happened to him. And he actually maybe plagiarized some of it as well. So that was fun. So after I found that out, I felt like there's kind of like no point, and the plot kind of became very repetitive, and it was just kind of like he wanted to torture a kid and was doing the most horrible things you could imagine to this kid. Yeah, and I just found it ultimately pointless. So it was a literal piece of poop. 3. Scratching Post, a non-fiction book you keep going back to in order to sharpen your mind or claws. Oh, a non-fiction. I wrote a fiction book down for my answer, but I know what the non-fiction book answer is going to be, and that's going to be The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs! And I keep talking about that book because that book is awesome, and I think everyone should read that book. It's one of my all-time favorite books. I've read it twice. And I was going through my books looking for books to reread next year, and I was like, I can't read The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs again. But I also really want to read The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs again. But, you know. Yeah, I just find that book so fascinating, and learning more about dinosaurs and like the little details about dinosaurs and like the origins of dinosaurs. And I'm looking at a dinosaur cup that I have over there. I love dinosaurs. Yeah, and I find that, you know, learning more and more about a topic, and learning about the little details, not just like this overarching stuff, and, you know, like mindless details, like a T-Rex was this size and this big and it ate this and that. It's like, no, like talking about, you know, everything about it. Yeah, that's really cool. Question 4. Mouse, a short book or short story that you like to play with and then devour. So a short story that's kind of, you know, stuck with you. You can hear my cats in the background. Actually, cat. Ah, she's so cute. That's Ed. Anyways, I wish I could, like, well, have her tail on the screen. Anyways, so I'm gonna go back to one that I read years ago, and still think about today. It's Berenice, that's how we were told to pronounce it in class, by Edgar Allan Poe, one of his lesser known stories. It's about a man obsessed with his cousin / lover's teeth. You know how weird things were in 19th century America. Yeah, and it literally made me jump off the floor. I was lying on the floor in my dorm room reading it, and I literally jumped off the floor because I was like, I have to like be completely conscious of everything around me because I was shocked and scared by that. Yeah, And readers at the time, I looked it up, they actually complained of how like violent and gory it was. So I mean, if that tells you anything about the story. I also love it because it triggered that physical response to me, and the character of Aegeus is a fascinating study in like monomania, and I wrote a whole essay on monomania in Edgar Allan Poe, particularly concentrating on Berenice. Question 5, Hairball. A book that you liked on the first read, but after the passage of time, you find it makes you want to throw up. And I'm gonna kind of cheap out, and I'm gonna say Harry Potter. Only because I want to gag every time I think about Rowling, and I don't know if I could reread it without her. Now, I still have a very nostalgic love for Harry Potter, and it will always hold a very special place in my heart. Like, I was obsessed with Harry Potter. I went to all like the midnight releases of the books and the movies. I read the books like 10 times, except for the last one, which I'll talk about in a reason. And a whole collection of Harry Potter stuff. My mom to this day is still obsessed with Harry Potter. You know, but that last book kind of also gave me a very satisfying conclusion, because, to be honest, the last book was really bad. It was so repetitive. There was so much that had to be edited out and reworked, but the turf had become too big to touch at that point. And so they just kind of let her just do whatever she wanted with Harry Potter at that point. And I was satisfied because it wasn't good. I was like, okay, this is the end. This is the end of Harry Potter for me. And I don't need to continue with my love for it anymore. And I could just leave Harry Potter behind. Unlike the turf, who just won't let it die. Just let it die. Let it end. I'm gonna still talk about it. Sorry. Number 6, attitude. A main character with the attitude of a cat. And the booktube goddess describes this as independent, egotistical, and cunning. And I'd also add a sense of playfulness as well to that description. And I'm gonna go with Croup from the Malazan series. And he's a fat cat. Like, he's described in the book as being corpulent. He's very self-motivated, but also kind of caring in his own fashion, which, you know, cats are. You know, they won't necessarily always snuggle with you, but they'll be beside you. And, you know, they'll dig their nails into you and bite you to show their affection. So he's also deceptively powerful. You know, as fat cats can be. You look at a fat cat and go, oh, that's lazy. But then they get up and, like, run like crazy after something. You're like, oh wow, that cat is like totally different than what I thought it was. You know, from lounging around to jumping in action all of a sudden. He's also called the most intelligent man in the Malazan Empire. So yeah, perfect. A book or series that is so perfect you can't find any flaws in it at all, and for me that's going to be the Wheel of Time series. And I often find myself defending the common complaint that the books kind of dip in regards to plot and action in the middle. But actually books 8 and 9, which are right like kind of in the middle of the series, are actually some of my favorites, because we get to spend a lot of time with the characters just being themselves, and this is where we really get to see a lot of character development happening. So yeah, we don't get a lot of going on plot wise, but like characterization is just as important for me, or even more important at times. And I have such a love for the series that I literally, like, I have a tattoo on my arm here. It says Taviran, which is a complicated word to describe, but it's basically like accepting the things that you can't change, but changing the things that you can't change. Basically, it's, you know, to sum it up very vaguely. Next question. Hiss, your favorite scary or favorite horror or scary book. And I have to keep going back to House of Leaves. I've read that, it was almost 7 years ago now. I was looking through my old videos. So I really have to reread that. And it still scares me when I think about it. There's a lot going on in the book, but the scary part is that we follow this family that lives in this house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. Not like the TARDIS. Well, not unlike the TARDIS, but it's not as fun and awesome as the TARDIS. It's this black hallway that kind of leads to like this gigantic dark labyrinth that has something in it, and I am terrified of the dark. Like, I don't care who knows. I'm 34 years old and I do not like the dark. I don't think I'll ever like the dark. I never like the dark. There's just this big no. So like in the dark and then not being alone in the dark, and then hallways. Because, you know, like, doors open onto hallways, so you're lying there in bed looking at the door at this hallway, this dark hallway, and you're going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, while you're reading this book. Yeah, it was scary. And the last question, 9 lives. A series or author you liked that was dead to you, but then you liked again. And I kind of gonna go with Ben Aronovich and the Rivers of London series, because I love all the main novels that I've read so far. The audiobooks, that's how you have to listen to them. The Rivers of London series is like a police procedural drama, but with magical crimes. Yeah, that's the basic summary. There's a bump in the road. There's a big bump in the road with the series of short stories called Tales from the Folly, which I don't know. I don't know if it was me reading it as opposed to listening to it on audiobook, or if it was like this one story that was just, you know, didn't feature any of the characters that I come to love and adore. Yeah, I didn't exactly hate it, but it definitely wasn't up to par with the novels. But then I know like the next full-length novel in the series will be just as good as the other. So I know like we've got a little like dip, but we'll be back. We'll be back up here very shortly when I listen to the next book in the series. So that's it. That's the Meowing About book tags. I'm going to try and insert some clips of cats if I can get them. And thank you for watching.